From my time as a kid until now currently, Mega Man has been one of the many franchises that has molded my entire childhood alongside Sonic and Pokemon here. Like, I've stated in previous videos regarding the franchise, sub-series or otherwise, that this blue bomber of Capcom right here never at one point ceased to amaze me and bring me a really good and fun experience. Which is why Capcom decided to say, hey, why not bring him back, you know? Since 2015, the Mega Man franchise has been what I would consider to be in its revival state, where for the course of nearly 9 years now, there have been collections upon collections of our favorite renditions of the Blue Bomber. Like, dude, seriously, from the original games to the X series, as well as Zero and ZX, and now Battle Network releasing recently with its very own legacy collection here, surely us Mega Man fans are feasting right alongside both Sonic and Kirby fans respectively. But of course, all of that is neat and all, but I'm not just here to talk about the general overview of the Mega Man franchise here, more so than I am to talk about one specifically, that of course being the Mega Man X games. But hey Capcom, if you're ever watching this in the near future, or maybe right now as we speak, I'm definitely 120% down to talk about the Battle Network series, since I know that the Legacy Collection is indeed popping off as it should be, and wanted to throw that detail out there in case anybody else wants to see that down the line. And no, this video does not count at all, but I thank you so much for understanding and knowing that this video exists, and I do recommend you watch it after this one. So a bit of a recap here everyone. Just last year I had began to take a dive into the Mega Man X franchise, starting with of course Mega Man X on the SNES, a game I still absolutely love today and one of my favorites that Capcom has produced because of not only how different it is from the original games, but has a solid time overall in terms of everything else that it's offering. And then we tackled Mega Man X2, which was just as fun as it was with Mega Man X1, especially love the armor upgrades this game had going for it, making stage progression feel like a nice breeze that I still enjoy to this very day, though not to the extent of Mega Man X1's, and of course we had Mega Man X3 where, oh my god, I still haven't recovered from this game since that last review came out, if I'm being completely honest. Man, talk about something that just didn't hit right at first glance. See, and now you know why it took me this long to make a Mega Man X video. Now, while Mega Man X3 was neither good or bad in terms of what it was offering for the X series, especially on the SNES at that, it definitely didn't feel like something that Capcom was 100% focused on during its development, which in case if you remember back in my Mega Man X3 video, Mega Man X3 was actually outsourced over to another developer at the time. And I think the reason for that actually turned out to be that for their next entry, Mega Man X4, Capcom was not only in on ensuring that the X series was alive and kicking for the 4th time around, sure, but instead of the SNES this go around, it would be opted for the next generation of consoles, specifically the Sony PlayStation. Yeah, the PS1, ladies and gentlemen, as the era of 3D gaming was just beginning to properly take place, I'd argue, due to its capabilities back in the day. While there was of course a Nintendo 64 and the Sega Saturn, they all paled in comparison with what this other console initially offered. And what it did offer at the time, oh man, my homeboy didn't really know when to quit. Like dude, so many games released for this damn thing in its initial 2 years alone that it was pretty insane to see Sony actively trying to outcompete its competitors at the time. I mean, you had the emergence of the Tekken franchise being the first ever 3D fighting game on home console, Crash Bandicoot with 2 games already marking its debut on the 3D platforming genre, Final Fantasy VII just releasing, like okay, I see what you did there Square, jumping ship from one console to another, holy hell, like I get it. And yet with all these games releasing on the PS1 at the time, one would start to assume that maybe Capcom here was starting to tempt their fate on this 3D technology of sorts with the Mega Man franchise here. Though of course they would do that later on for the PS2, but we're not there yet. But despite the need for 3D at the time, Capcom was actually not at all the least bit interested in trying out the 3D style with the X series or Mega Man Original for that matter, considering that Mega Man 8 had released a year before Mega Man X4, releasing in 1996, while X4 released in 1997 for the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. Oh, okay. Alright. Damn, Sega went hard. Plus, they already took a dip into the 3D framework early on with the release of Resident Evil back in 1996, and we would see Mega Man Legends take charge in the 3D aspects of Mega Man gameplay about a year or so later. I guess Capcom ultimately just wanted Mega Man X4 at the time to be different graphically by retaining much of the quality that its SNES counterparts provided, which in fact, just to get this point right out of the way first, this is the one thing I absolutely love the most about Mega Man X4's presentation. Everything about this game, from its graphical design standpoint to to its overall presentation is quite solid and refreshing. And while I am technically cheating a little bit here since I am playing this on the Legacy Collection and it upscales the quality a little bit, I still think this game holds phenomenally well today, easily retaining its quality from back then. The colors are nice in this one, the stage themes never look so vibrant at times and atmospheric in others. Like, dude, this game just looks so damn pretty. I mean, what can I say? I'm just very easy to please. I do know that yes, we still have yet to cover both Mega Man X5 and Mega Man X6 since they also released on the PS1 as well, but they honestly don't even come close to what Mega Man X4 provided back in its heyday, which can really be said on Capcom's commitment for those games, that I can talk a little bit more about it when we get to those. But bottom line with Mega Man X4, oh god, Capcom sure as hell stepped up their game with this one. There is just one small thing about X4 that I do want to critique here, and many of you are most likely aware of this by now. I mean, Mega Man X4 has been talked about so many damn times at this point, but it's the voice acting for this game, which if you have played Mega Man 8 back then you have a pretty solid idea as to what Mega Man X4's voice direction provides, and if you don't,
that's a good question.
the casting for this game is just so weird. Like X here, who sounds like a little kid and not so much the strong-willed Reploid that other voice actors later on will provide for him, and for Zero, well, this cutscene right here just perfectly describes him.
What am I fighting for?
Of course, this is easily something that is a product of its time given how far the voice acting talent has gone since then, but for what it's worth, it's not necessarily something that detracts the overall quality of X4 ironically. If anything, the voice acting alongside the gameplay shows that there was a larger budget for this game when compared to the previous titles. It may sound horrible and want to cause your ears to deafen, I totally get it, but hey, the idea exists regardless. And listen, if there is a bigger budget, it should also mean a bigger story here too, and whether or not you pay attention to the story of the Mega Man X franchise, that's totally on you, but for my big dumb brain and love for this series, I naturally gotta cover the story for this one, which, oh god. So a very quick disclaimer here before we continue further. So throughout my time playing this game since childhood, for some bizarre reason I cannot say why, I had this inherent need to skip the cutscenes and fast forward the dialogue segments, mainly because I just wanted to play the game, and so this will actually be the first time ever that I'm going to be paying attention to the story of Mega Man X4 here, which now after playing through both campaigns and then some, man, this story really sucks. It's bar none one of the worst of what the X series provides, as the entire plot is centered around the Repliforce, a military force that works alongside the Maverick Hunters to secure peace and prosperity between the Reploids and humans, which isn't that just the whole point of the Maverick Hunters to begin with, so why do they even exist? But because of an event known as the Sky Lagoon incident, they are now branded as Mavericks for something they clearly didn't do, and so because they are guilty of a crime that you know they didn't commit after all, they would talk things out with Hunter HQ and say, hey, it's all just a misunderstanding, right? Okay, so the result actually ends up being that after X or Zero ends up meeting with Colonel to talk things out, the Colonel instead decides to say haha but no to the idea of going to Hunter HQ for the sole reason, and I kid you not, I'm not even joking here, of honor and pride. Oh my god, is this really the story direction for this game? And so now that the Repliforce won't take responsibility for their actions, so to speak, the general of the Repliforce then decides to make a call-out post on Twitter worldwide to escalate the situation even further, stating that the Repliforce will now officially be an independent entity and want to seek their own independence, or to quote the general directly, that what they're doing is neither an insurrection or a rebellion. Oh my god, what is even happening here? Oh man, oh wow, okay, I think I am losing my mind. Oh, and then I mentioned that Sigma is back at it again and is actually the one orchestrating everything from the beginning, like he's Aizen from Bleach, because yeah, of course he would. See now, once this fiasco starts to kick into high gear, is in a regular Mega Man X adventure with X and Zero once again being called into action and stop the Repliforce before it's too late. And from here is where the story roughly branches out into two, because in case I forgot to mention this earlier, you not only get to play as X for this game, but also as Zero, marking his first official debut as a playable character, and not as a side character that gets scared of doors easily like in the previous game. Now for X, this is like the fourth time of him dealing with Maverick, so he takes his buster like he always does and just goes through the motions, since considering that we've seen him battle like what, 24 Mavericks already, there isn't just much focus to him other than the whole why do I keep fighting philosophy that usually starts to kick in once the credits roll. Not much is done with X, and that's honestly for the better, since we have a pretty solid idea as to who X is since the beginning of the franchise. But Zero on the other hand, oh my homeboy was packing. With X4 here making him playable, we see him more as an equal to X on the battlefield while also giving him some neat backstory to boot in the process. Here in X4 we start to slowly see the reasoning behind his purpose of the why he was created in the first place, as well as who he was created by, which for many Mega Man fans know that the answer is of course Dr. Wily, seen as a silhouette in Zero's dreams before being called into action to start the events of the game. Now who could have seen this one coming, huh? Not much changes in terms of gameplay structure with Zero here, but as he is forced to deal with the Repliforce and their declaration for independence, there is actually a whole lot more in terms of all that. You see, with Zero, he is also friends with the Colonel, who in the opening video showcases them as comrades or rivals at the very least sparring against each other. Not much is explained surrounding all of that, especially throughout the game. You kinda take it for what it is, but it shows that the stakes are somewhat high for Zero here. In addition to all of that and asking Colonel to put aside his pride for a bit, there is also Iris, Colonel's younger sister that Zero seems to somehow have a crush on throughout the game. Again, it just happens, not much is really explained with that, and if you really want to know more about Iris, I kinda suggest you play the Extreme games on the Game Boy Color. But of course, Zero then proceeds to take down the Repliforce's operations, and Colonel along with them heads to space to stop their endeavors. Did I ever mention that part? And then boom, he is now suddenly forced to fight Iris, consumed by pure resentment from Colonel's death and plans to destroy Zero, or something like that. I honestly don't even know. See, look, I gotta be honest, but this part always confused me because Iris barely showed up in cutscenes to make this sort of an impactful moment for me, and she just shows up with this weird purple orb that summons a mech to fight, and throughout the entire encounter, you're only just sitting there like, well, what the hell just happened? Hell, Iris to me wasn't as impressionable as Double, who is X's companion and boss counterpart for this section of the game, where we learned that he was actually a double agent all along working for Sigma. I mean, who could have thought with a name like Double, let's be honest here. Still, this did leave me with a really good impression on the yellow dude, because never have I seen a villain this malicious in an X game, or in any platformer for that matter, and his design speaks volumes in those aspects. Like, oh my god, look at what a badass he is, and then you're shame he couldn't come back for future games. And since this is also a Mega Man X game, this does mean that towards the end of the journey, and after getting kicked in the robot balls in Zero's case, Sigma shows up to deliver the final battle to our dear Maverick Hunters here, who I guess for this entry and this entry only, he's now officially the Grim Reaper? Like, okay, I'm sure it's only for the first phase of his fight, but still, like, who was even asking for this? Regardless, it is here where Sigma tells Zero and the player about his past, or at least partially, as he tells us for the first time ever that Zero was once a Maverick that Sigma had to put down while he was in charge of Hunter HQ back in the day. Oh yeah, Sigma was part of the Maverick Hunters, in case you didn't know that, and that is mostly emphasized in Maverick Hunter X with its AOV, but yeah, he was in charge before, well, you kinda already know. To go back to when I said that I usually skip the cutscenes and fast forward the dialogue for this game, the moment of Zero and Sigma fighting here was actually the one cutscene I never skipped, because admittedly, it was just always cool to see Zero, Maverick or not, just wreck the living crap out of Sigma before Sigma ultimately put Zero out of commission, and later the events of the series unfold thereafter. Plus, I mean, it was a really cool fight scene that even made me wish for a Mega Man X anime, as I'm sure many did at the time too. What's even funnier about this encounter, to me at least, is how despite Sigma telling us that Zero was a Maverick, and after the whole cutscene transition ends, Sigma then just proceeds to ask Zero in a state of shock like, wait, Zero, you were a Maverick? Like, oh man, that always cracks me up. Yes, I am aware that this is a mistranslation, it's not exactly what he's saying 100% here, but honestly, I really do not care. Like every X game before and moving forward, Sigma is dealt with once again, but as an act of desperation before waving his hand in the air and claim his return, he proceeds to blow up the space station as a final resort, to which the general then takes action to stop it from colliding with the Earth as one final heroic act for the Repliforce, which, no, I gotta be honest, it didn't feel earned at all, because all this mess would have never happened had you, the general, disarmed yourselves in the first place. Once that all settles though, X and Zero are seen as the only ones escaping the facility, pondering about their very existence for a fourth time around after witnessing what had occurred between them and the Repliforce. Well, this is more so with Zero, since he did get his robot ass handed to him by killing off his friend in arms and his girlfriend, and then learning about being a Maverick by the big bald man himself. So yeah, Zero, you sure were welcome with open arms, dude. Like, wow, let me tell you. And with that, we wrap up the story for Mega Man X4 here, and man, that was just awful. Looking back, I'm honestly not in the least bit surprised as to why I even skipped the cutscenes and dialogue for the story of Mega Man X4 here, since, I mean, to try and process the level of idiocy that went on between the Repliforce and X and Zero here, it's just not worth it, man. I even wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemies, and everything about this just would have been easily resolved had they just talked things out at their local Reploid cafe, or just have a trip with the bros like in Final Fantasy 15 or something. Then again, I guess it kinda needed to happen, otherwise we wouldn't get much of a focus on Zero here, because they really fleshed him out as a character in this entry particularly, helping at least to close some of the gaps they mentioned back in Mega Man X2 and Mega Man X3 about him. I'm still waiting for that fated battle between X and Zero that they keep teasing at the end there, but we're gonna have to wait and see for next time. See, now I know that fight is happening, and I'm definitely ready for that sweet pay-per-view, that's for sure. I will also admit that while witnessing the cutscenes, that the game's tone is certainly the most dark I've seen, and regardless how dumb the story ended up being, the direction was pretty solid for this game, at least depicting the dire situation that goes on in these Mega Man X games. This alone makes me appreciate the story just a little bit, and it does showcase the grim reality of the X series, at least when you compare it to the original series. I doubt Mega Man Original could even survive what X is capable of doing. And as far as I'm aware, this is also the one game in the entire X series that actually shows blood, and I'm not exaggerating here. The first few minutes when you start at Zero starts off this way, and Double's entrance is just gruesome to look back to. Sheesh, the writers for this game felt like things needed to not only be dire, but I guess gory for this robotic future utopia, in case the first 3 games didn't emphasize that enough. This is a kid's game. This is a kid's game. This was literally rated E for everyone back in the day. How in the hell did they manage to get away with all this? However, Mega Man X4 is mostly about the gameplay in the end and what it has to offer on both X and Zero's fronts, as well as what the 30-bit 2 graphics provided in terms of stage design, power-ups, abilities, and of course boss encounters, which I can say as a whole that Capcom, oh man, they absolutely know what they were cooking with at the time for this 4th entry here. So for the purpose of this video here, I did a standard X playthrough and Zero playthrough to get a glimpse of both gameplay styles, but on top of that, I also did a Zero playthrough off screen, then did another X one with the ultimate armor for the fun of it, and then a third Zero playthrough in the black armor, because I'm gonna tell you right now, oh my god, I freaking love this game so much. Man, oh, excuse me there for a second, I apologize. Starting with stage designs and layouts first, what I can say about them is that Mega Man X4 certainly takes a page out of X1 in terms of stage progression, because stages have never been easier to progress through than ever before, and I guess it's partly due to X's movement in this game, but also because there aren't that many gimmicks to impede your progress in the first place. Once again, that PTSD at Mega Man X3 is kicking in high gear, folks, and I don't like that one bit. The stages are also longer here, but they're broken into 2 acts that might also be considered as 2 full stages, because say for example if you entered the 2nd act of the stage and then you end up dying in the process of completing it, the game just allows you to continue from the first checkpoint of that 2nd act, giving players less worries to go through the beginning of the stage and hope for the best. And if we're going back to my rambles on Mega Man X3 and its broken level design and enemy placement, then you absolutely know that this is a very good thing in my opinion. Easily makes this game a 10 out of 10, and it allows for a lot of replay value as well. This does make the game easier by default because of the split in stages, and because of it, this makes X4 roughly the easiest one of the entire X series, so to speak, which is not a bad thing, mind you, as you're still given that challenge that most X games are known for at the end of the day. It's mostly about the means to get there that makes X4 less difficult, but overall it gets the job done in terms of what is being thrown at you throughout each and every stage. And the themes of each stage here in X4, oh, they're just so incredibly different this go around too. Okay, well now let's be honest here, they're not that different from the previous games, but they're still different enough to stand out by a mere mile when compared to the SNES trilogy. Either it's because Capcom gave an absolute damn for this game, or it's thanks to the 30-bit 2 processing power on a 3D console machine. I couldn't tell you at the end of the day here. It's probably just my love for this game blinding me from seeing what may or may not be there in the first place. Like any other Mega Man X game, all the stages have something extra to collect as well, allowing for exploration and backtracking depending on how you want your playthrough to go. Our tanks, sub-tanks, and armor parts for X are all back as they will be moving forward, and you even got the ride armors and ride chasers from the previous games for a couple of stages too. Much like the previous games, they don't overstay their welcome since you only use them in 4 stages for brief moments and encounters. You got the standard red ride armor from the first game back in action with a fresh redesign, as well as a jump and dash attack to boot, and accompanying this, you also got a blue one that hovers for a few seconds and has an arm cannon instead, being one of my least favorite ride armors because it's not as fun to control as the standard one if I'm being honest here. Plus, you can even use the standard one at the end of the volcano stage to fight Magma Dragoon with, like you do not understand how cool this is. As for the ride chasers, blasters, they're used exclusively in Jet Stingray's stage, and while it is a neat stage structure that's different from the others, storming through a naval sea base of the Repli forces, it's only used as a one-note gimmick and not much is seen afterwards with it, similar to Mega Man X2. But hey, I can't really complain about this too much as I am glad to see it back regardless, and also, depending on your playthrough, you can even see X or Zero ride a red or blue one to complement each other's colors. Now that is just best friends goals right there. Of course, as mentioned, you got the usual armor set to collect for this game in X's playthrough, and let me just say this real quick before we move on in terms of technicality of this armor set here, because holy crap, did Capcom just give us one of the best armors I've ever seen in an X game, period. No joke when I say that this armor's utility is by far one of the best ones I've seen yet, and going back to what I said about Mega Man X2 and X3's armor parts, and how I felt some of those parts were underutilized, it seemed that Capcom did not mess around in the slightest in giving X some neat tricks up his robo sleeves for this 4th mission here. Plus, I mean, it looks just so damn cool. Seriously, X looks like an action figure with his armor set, and I just want to have it now. I like, where? Like on eBay? Yeah, sure, I'll go get it. You know, I'll be right back. Let's just move on. Let's just move on. Continue on with the show. The armor perks are pretty much standard X upgrades, especially if you play the X series more times than you can count here. Again, in my case, I've played this game since childhood, so I basically have a certificate at this point about how much I know about this damn game. You got the air dash like before, added defense, and better charge weapons, but their gimmicks work wonders in regards to the level of challenge you're going to be facing throughout the course of your time playing as X. For the leg upgrade, you got this neat little hover ability that allows you to stay in the air for a few seconds just to adjust yourself if you get screwed over by platforming or enemy placement, and it's a neat mechanic that I find some enjoyment out of, but it doesn't really greatly affect much of the gameplay style in both good or bad ways. The body upgrade introduces X to the Nova Strike, a cool dash attack that can destroy enemies that are in your way if you feel like the X Buster kinda deserves a break or two. Looks cool visually, but in reality is not as useful as it should have been, given that to activate it, you kinda need to get hit in the process, similar to the Giga Crush back in Mega Man X2, but it's still a neat addition to what X still has up his vast arsenal. And did I ever mention that it was cool? And since while we're on the topic of the Nova Strike, I'm sure that me and plenty other Mega Man X fans equate this mechanic to the ultimate armor that you unlock via a cheat code, where you don't really get the armor parts in one go, but you can spam the hell out of the Nova Strike as well, making essentially the entire game's difficulty obsolete. Like, look at my homeboy X, go! I will say though that I kinda do hate how the body upgrade is considered to be one of the last of the armor parts to collect depending on certain routes, as in order to find it, you need to use Web Spider's special weapon to climb on a platformer in Magma Dragoon stage, and then have a fully charged shot of Slash Beast's special weapon that can only be done with the arm upgrade, and to grab that one, you have to do this annoying vertical platforming with all these spikes in Storm Owl stage that once again requires the Web Spider special ability. Like, god, oh man, this is such a pain. I don't even want to wish this upon my worst enemies. Instead of the usual one arm upgrade though, we do get a 2-for-1 special deal here with Dr. Light that gives us 2 different options to how to tackle the game moving forward. Oh yeah, you heard me correctly there. Dr. Light was just granting us something special for this one here, further making this game the best one out of the entire franchise. The first one is the standard in quotations upgrade, since it does complement the rest of the color scheme for the armor here, and it allows X to have up to 4 charge shots readily available to him to use at his disposal, which for this game is an absolute godsend for endgame boss fights, since you don't need X to constantly get his charge shots ready to go while deafening your ears in the process with the loud and annoying ping it usually accompanies itself with. The second arm part is a stronger charge attack that also acts as an AoE attack that helps with swarms of enemies and causes some indirect damage to certain bosses. Again, for this one I always equate it to the charge shot to the ultimate armor, since I find its utility for it better there than here, as well as in X5 and X6, because the first armor part with the 4 charge shots, it honestly just works better for the gameplay design that Mega Man X4 has. But the one upgrade that I find the most broken in my opinion, and is the reason why this armor is indeed the best of the best that X has offered in the entire series, is the head upgrade. Because did Dr. Light forget to remove a glitch in its system, or left it entirely intentional, this upgrade essentially allows you to use special weapons at no cost at all. And you heard me correctly there, no cost at all, which allows you to spam those special weapons against bosses without a care in the world, further making this game easier from that point on. Plus, as a sidebar here, it also makes getting this weapons tank obsolete with X's playthrough, unless you're going for a special challenge run with X that requires it, but then again, for those runs, I just think a Mighty X Buster would just get the job done in the end. In terms of the other collectibles, well, it's like I said, you got the hard tanks to collect for both characters separately, as well as the E-tanks, though 2 this time instead of 4 to further add some level of difficulty to the game already, and something that we'll see in the next few games moving forward as well. It's a standard approach that I enjoy to this very day, and it still helps for the boss rush at 0 and the Sigma encounters for both. As for the special weapons, I think these were the most utilized weapons I've ever used in a Mega Man X game because they actually serve the purpose towards helping out in stages, especially with that aforementioned head upgrades ability. Well, I say they are the most utilized, but it's pretty obvious that I use them for the Mavericks that they're weak to at the end of the day, but every now and then I can't help but use some of them for platforming and again, getting those perks like the hard tanks, E-tanks, and armor upgrades. They're not as bad as the previous ones in those aspects, and it does add a level of flavor that's still there for added enjoyment if you ever plan to use them a lot for your platforming. Though I can't just talk about X's gameplay for this entry only, since I already mentioned Zero makes his debut as a playable character here as well, so naturally that means double the action and double the fun. For Zero's gameplay in X4, while he does have special abilities, they're really nothing like X's, which makes sense since we have to remember the reason that X can even use the same weapons in the first place is because that's in his programming, but that doesn't mean that Zero has no tricks up his sleeves when it comes to the skills he obtains from them. Besides being different in playstyle, such as hitting enemies in close quarters with his trusty lightsaber that he most likely took from Sigma after Mega Man X1, Zero's moveset is like that of a fighting game, or dare I say a hack and slash game, since the special weapons from the Mavericks you face make Zero side of things feel more like a progression out of that of a Bayonetta or Devil May Cry game to kind of compare to something that makes sense here, sort of. What this means is that essentially, the more you progress through the game as Zero, the more Zero has in his arsenal that when compared to X in movement, makes the game stupendously fun to traverse through, as you got Zero having this nifty double jump, as well as an air dash like that of X's leg upgrade, alongside so many other cool moves he can pull off in the process. Zero can have his sword turn to fire as an uppercut move, twirl around as an aerial attack that does heavy damage, a dash attack that can help with traversal and puts the Nova Strike to shame at times, and a literal fist of fury as he summons an AoE attack that can annihilate enemies around him. Holy moly, Zero isn't really playing around here, kids. Because of this, Zero ended up being my favorite playthrough to go through for this review, be it recording for footage as well as off screen because of these upgrades and abilities that I'm genuinely surprised as to why it even took me this long to give his playthrough a go in the first place. You see, usually when I play Mega Man X4, I always end up having my time spent on X due to how familiar he functions like in the SNES trilogy, and so it was like the clear default choice for me. But now having experienced what Zero has to offer, I don't think I can go back to ever playing Mega Man X4 without at least going through Zero's story first because of the high kinetic energy that his gameplay has compared to X's more long-range methodical approach. This alone may set a really high bar for what Mega Man X5 and onwards might present for our Red Swordsman here, but overall of X4, I am proud to say that Zero just takes the cake as well as the entirety of what the game offers. Like, man, Capcom, you really did an amazing job with this character here. Like, just imagine if he had like his own spin-off series, and it's like for the GBA, considering like the timeline here or whatever, like, you know, like, that would just be incredible, man. Like, imagine the possibilities of that even happening. So with all that said and done, does this mean that Mega Man X4 is a solid game in the end? The answer is of course it is. Have you not seen me talk about it for the past 20 minutes now? Okay, but to be a bit more serious now, I'm willing to say that Mega Man X4 is easily one of my favorite Mega Man X games of all time. More so than Mega Man X1 because of the amount of time I spent playing this game when compared to the others. To compare my feelings about this game in Sonic terms, Mega Man X1 is the Sonic 3 and Knuckles in terms of experience, gameplay, and just overall satisfaction. Like, I'm telling you now, man, does this game not miss at all in the slightest. This game is perfection in every way possible, and it holds so massively well visually and in its gameplay that it makes me wonder why Capcom didn't just continue onwards with what was established here with Mega Man X5 and X6. Or I could just be saying that because of my inherent bias for this game. I honestly do not care, but my point pretty much stands. Mega Man X4 at the end of the day is a pretty solid and fun experience that I highly recommend you play as either your first Mega Man X game or just a Mega Man X game period. Of course, I would be dumb enough not to say that I recommend playing these games on the Legacy Collections because it shows that Capcom, we want more of this, and I mean, we are seeing that with Battle Network here, so I mean, come on now, you guys. You're doing yourselves a major disservice not buying these games and trying them out for yourselves, and trust me, when you do end up buying these games, you will not regret it one bit, and I will continue to say that to the very end. Trust me, this is going to be a broken record. And you know, now that we finished 4 games of the X series, this means we got 4 more to deal with down the line, so clearly immediately after Mega Man X4, we're gonna have Mega Man X5 to tackle for next time and see what X and Zero's adventures unfold there. And I'm not very excited to tell you because this is where things are definitely gonna go downhill, and I am not excited to see that. I just got into Mega Man X4 again.